disabled people are reclaiming their identities and how we want to be referred to.
All right, well, that's good.
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Hi, my name is Dacy. I have a rare genetic disease called Spinal Muscular Atrophy type 2. I'm a disability advocate, writer. I kind of just talk about disability competence, representation for disabled bodies, and I do that on social media on my various platforms. I go by Wheelchair Rapunzel, and that's kind of what I do.
My name is Nancy Bartlett, and I'm a resident of Madison Senior Living, and I have worked with disabilities from time to time, well, before I was retired. So I'm interested in talking to Alex, and I'd like to know first, what is the general consensus of those with disabilities, and how do you prefer to be referred to?
Yeah, so this is such an interesting topic about different verbiage with referring to disabled people nowadays. I prefer identity first language. So I like to refer to myself as a disabled person, not a person with a disability, which would be considered person first language, which is by and large what many people were taught. And we just started to see a shift from, PFL to identity first language within the past few years, because disabled people are reclaiming their identities and how we want to be referred to, instead of being taught these things that have been so ingrained in our system and society by non-disabled people. So I do like to go by identity first language, but I think the really important thing is that, yes, there are disabled people that like to be called a person with a disability, and it's really up to the person, and it's really individualistic, kind of like pronouns. Everybody has their own, and all you have to do is ask. So I think it's really important to know that there isn't one correct way to refer to a disabled person, but really just having these open conversations and finding out what the disabled person likes to be referred to as.
All right, well, that's good. I'm glad that there's a difference and that we can express that.
Yes.
How would you describe your life when you were growing up with a disability?
Yeah, so my life growing up with a disability was it sounds a little ableist when I say, oh, it was normal, because obviously when you're disabled, like, there are things that come up, and but I think my parents really instilled like a sense of normalcy in my life. So we did everything. I went boating, fishing with my family. We went up to the cottage during the summers. I had sleepovers. I had friends. We would tie a rope to the back of my wheelchair, and I would pull my friends on their rollerblades. Like, I had like a very just average childhood, cookouts. And I'm from Illinois, so I'm a Midwest girl. So, just cookouts, the parents throwing back some beers, the kids playing, kind of just a very, very average, childhood. But my parents never like strayed away from talking about my disability. I always knew I had SMA since I was very little. Like, I knew I had that. But we never made it this big thing. Neither of my parents were very involved in the disability community. But I just had a very, very good, happy, average childhood.
Could you explain your disability a little bit more in detail?
Yeah. So I have a rare genetic disease called spinal muscular atrophy type 2, which affects your cervical motor neurons. So basically, in like layman's terms, the signals aren't going to my brain, to my muscles, and the muscles atrophy progressively. So it's a progressive disease. So yeah, it's amazing because we're talking, there are all these new FDA approved treatments for SMA nowadays, one of which is the most expensive drug in the entire world at $2.1 million, which is mind blowing. But I'm currently on one of the treatments, and it has been changing my entire life and helping me. And modern medicine is just so amazing.
Well, that's wonderful. I'm glad you found something, or they found something that's doing you so well.
Mm-hmm.
The American Disabilities Act, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, the ADA is obviously pivotal in disability history. It marked so much. It marked for me like just disability being visible in society, and for society at large to acknowledge the rights of disabled people, which is something here in 2021, we still have so much work to do. We're talking about, we see all these things about human rights and diversity and inclusion. And I feel like disability is always at the bottom of those conversations. And that's why the ADA is so important, because it marked legislation that is on the books that acknowledges the rights of disabled people.
And it has an effect on the laws that cover
Exactly.
the accommodations and so forth for disabilities. Yeah. Good. Well, where does that excel? Where does that act excel?
I think the ADA, it was signed in, I think it just had the 30th year anniversary. So it has a lot of amazing things. Obviously there's different laws about, educational rights, transportation rights, various things that, accommodating disabled people in the workplace. And I think even though there are those strong kind of foundations in the ADA, those things have no oversight. And I think, yes, the foundation is there, and that's where it excels with great foundational pieces of legislation, but there is no oversight. And these laws are never, kind of overseen by any institution. So I think that's where the ADA could definitely improve.
Has it improved? I mean, has it come a long way with accessibility in the public places, in stores, in restaurants?
Honestly, in my opinion, I think, just from, I have a very active social life. I go out a lot and I'm in the world quite a bit. And yeah, accessibility is lacking in this world that we live in. It is very lacking. And I've been places where I said to the owner, like, this is against the ADA. You cannot have a step here, or you need to have like some sort of accommodation, because I think it's after, I don't know the super specifics, but any newer buildings are supposed to follow ADA guidelines. So, and then the owner will say, oh, I didn't even know that. So it's just frustrating, because it's like, and then the only thing that I could do, I can't call the police and say, ADA violation. No, what I would have to do is fight and go and fill out and like start a lawsuit of some sort. And it's just frustrating because there's no like direct oversight that doesn't put the labor of the issue on disabled people.
Okay, so following that along, they don't use the ADA guidelines when it comes to architecture and building planning and
I mean, some buildings, yes, but a lot of buildings, no.
Okay, so is that where you feel that the ADA falls short?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think the ADA, like I said, it's pivotal, but it definitely needs some revamping. And I think a lot of people could agree with that. But yeah, I definitely think it falls short with accessibility 100%. I think that there needs to be a separate institution that directly oversees ADA compliance 100%.
Good idea. What has contributed, you think, to the most to your own independence? You seem pretty independent, so I just wondered what you attribute that to.
Yeah, I think honestly, my upbringing, like we were talking about earlier, I had a very, my parents never coddled me. They were very like throw me in the deep end and let me swim type of parenting. So I think that is really what culminated my independence and my drive. We love a little wheelchair pun. But I definitely just, you know, I'm just independent and I have drive, and I think that's because my parents just let me do my thing.
Well, that's great. I wish more parents had that attitude.
Well, we see that, with disabled people, like I see so many disabled parents coddling their kids, and just because they're disabled, the parents are a lot more overprotective of the child, and to me that's just really detrimental. I see parents choosing to homeschool because their kid is disabled. And I was thinking in my head, like, if I were homeschooled and I didn't get that socialization that I need and go to school and like learn how to interact with this world as a disabled person, how am I ever going to make it?
Well, is mainstreaming more popular now or more available now than it had used to be?
Like mainstream education?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I went to public school. I went to public high school, public grammar school, everything. I went to college. So yeah, I would say it's definitely, there's a lot going on in the education system in and of itself with disability and disability rights, but yeah, definitely.
Well, what do you think is the biggest struggle right now for someone with disabilities? Is it the physical struggle out in this normal world, or is it more changing minds and perceptions of the people in the world?
Yeah, no, that's great because, as an advocate, we always say, the issue isn't my wheelchair, it's that my wheelchair can't go upstairs. So it's not the disabled person that's the issue. And we're always like, well, the wheelchair is the problem, the disabled person's the problem. But it's like, no, we just don't have the tools to interact in the society as the person that I am, which is worthy and whole as the person I am with this wheelchair. Um, so yeah, I love that. And I think there's so much work to be done, but I definitely think changing mindsets is so incredibly important. Changing perceptions. And that's kind of the bread and butter of what I do online on my platforms is just, I can't tell you how many comments I've received from people just seeing me live my life. And they're like, oh, wow, who knew a disabled person could do that? And I'm just like, yeah, look at that. You know what I mean? So I think overall, so much work needs to be done with changing attitudes, but also like we were talking about with the ADA and changing that legislation that is just as important.
So how would we go about that? The ADA needs it is important and needs to be carried a little farther. But how would you suggest that the layman go about helping change minds and attitudes?
I think giving disabled people a seat at the table. I think that needs to be at the forefront. And I think and it's not like, oh, we're giving you the seat. It's like we deserve those seats. And I think there needs to be more disabled people in leadership roles using their voices to speak on these issues. And yes, allies are amazing, but disabled people need to be at the forefront of these changes. And because of the marginalization that we experience, we're always talked over by non-disabled people. So I think, more disabled people in political atmospheres, more disabled people in leadership roles, and just keep advocating and having our allies amplify our voices is really what's going to change attitudes, accessibility, the ADA, everything.
Now, but one example that I have known lately is I just moved from Texas, and the governor of Texas is disabled. He is in a wheelchair, and he is an awesome governor. So that's one place where that shines.
Exactly. And we see that, when different politicians or people in power are directly affected by disability, that it seems to be definitely more of a pressing issue. So I think that is important.
Do you think your experience as an entrepreneur has been difficult, has been different as someone with a disability?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think, I've been doing, I started my own clothing line a few years ago, right when I was just starting Instagram. And I think as a disabled entrepreneur, I love entrepreneurship with disabled people because of how accessible it is. I don't have to go to a 9 to 5. I work for myself, and I'm able to accommodate my own fatigue. If I need a break or if I'm having a bad day, then I could just, relax in my pajamas and do what I need to do for myself. And I just love that part of entrepreneurship and disability, is that it's so accommodating. So I think it's very amazing for disabled people, but yeah, I think it's a little different. I mean, like I said, just being able to kind of do what I have to do in my house and not have to worry about showing up to the 9 to 5 with caregivers and this and that and transportation, I think is so good. And I'm a huge proponent of disability and entrepreneurship.
That sounds like you've got it well thought out and taking care of business. Is there something, we may have touched on this earlier, but is there something that the people can do to be allies and advocates for people with disabilities?
Just listen and amplify. It's as simple as that. Just listen to actually disabled people. And, because there's many times I hear people talking in my comment section, and it'll be like 2 non-disabled people like, no, say this isn't right, to another, but it's like,
we really don't know, do we?
Exactly. Just listen and amplify. That is the best.
Well, good. It's been great talking to you, and I'd like to would like to keep contact with you.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I had such a great time, and I would love to keep in touch.
And I think to myself,